Okay. All right. So thank you all for coming. We're here for Strategies for Success, Autism in Early Childhood. It is our last brown bag of the school year. And next year we plan to bring you more, but for this school year, this is our last one. I just want to introduce you to Dr. Nina Brown, our speaker. Her bio, Dr. Nina Brown is an early childhood special education class-based teacher in FCPS and has been teaching in a non-categorical setting for over 20 years. She recently earned a Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership and Administration, conducting research on building trust with parents to develop and cultivate collaborative relationships between school and home settings. Dr. Brown strives to ensure students' individual needs are met in all settings and looks forward to sharing tips and strategies that would be helpful for ensuring the success of all children, but especially those on the autism spectrum. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Nina Brown.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. I also realize how valuable your time is, especially at this time of year. So thank you for spending some of it here with us today. And then I also wanted to thank Amy and Anne for inviting me to come and present on this topic. Since April was Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, it's definitely an appropriate time to dive a little bit deeper into what is autism spectrum disorder and how it impacts our youngest learners in the classroom. So I prepared this presentation thinking of those working in preschool classrooms as the primary audience, but I know there's always more to learn. So if you don't fall into that category, I hope you're able to glean some information, just become better familiar with autism, or maybe hear a few strategies that are new to you, or perhaps something you've tried in the past and this is the boost you need to bring it back and just to kind of refresh your toolbox. So the outcomes today, they're pretty basic. I wanted to go over some of the more common characteristics of autism and then discuss some strategies that you can start using right away. When thinking about today's discussion, the hope is that you will find some strategies that work for all children, ensuring that all students can access meaningful learning opportunities, because these strategies will work for pretty much every child. So I want to stress the word spectrum in autism spectrum disorder. As I go over some of the common characteristics, you'll probably think of children you have in your class currently, or children you've had in the past, or that you've worked with in some capacity. So having one or more of these characteristics does not necessarily mean a child has autism. We're looking at the whole picture. How intense or significant are these characteristics? How much do they impact that child's ability to learn throughout their day? And that being said, every child is unique. Their abilities are on a spectrum. Some children may be nonverbal. They demonstrate significant interfering behaviors, while others may interact with others, only requiring a little bit of support, and can be successful in the general education environment with some strategies that they've learned over time. So the last bullet is that according to the CDC, as of 2022, autism occurs in about 1 in 44 children, which has really reduced over time. So typically they say it's more prevalent in boys, although research is emerging that suggests autism in girls may be identified as something else, or it's identified later on as they get older. So I touched on some of the common characteristics of autism. So students with autism, they have difficulty with communication and social interaction. Those are the big look-fors. And these are very much intertwined. So also looking at some repetitive behaviors, unusually strong attachments to objects or special interests, resistant to change, sensory sensitivities, either hypersensitive or hyposensitive. You might see kids lining up objects, walking on tiptoes. Those are common, but that does not necessarily mean that they have autism either. So you have to, again, I stress you have to look at the whole picture. I had a student, he loved to line up his cars, and his mother was just convinced that he had autism, and she was very concerned and would come to me. And if you ask him, I mean, he was lining them up to get ready to go into the car wash, and he wasn't lining up other objects. It was when he was playing with his cars in the garage. So you just really have to, kind of, look at the whole picture and observe their play. Walking on tiptoes, that could be an indicator of something else, though it is quite common in kids that have autism. So I included the Fairfax County definition of autism, and this is for eligibility purposes. So this is if a child were to be found eligible with an autism label in the county. So it's defined as a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interactions generally evident before age 3 that adversely affects a student's educational performance. Other characteristics often associated with autism are engagement in repetitive activities and stereotyped movements, resistance to environmental change or changes in daily routines, and unusual responses to sensory experiences. So I highlighted some of the salient points in terms of the characteristics and the look-fors, but really focusing on before age 3. And that's very important, especially for us as early childhood educators, to really be aware of some of these signs and some of these characteristics, because research shows that the earlier that kids are able to access intervention, the better the outcome. So as I mentioned, one of the characteristics is delayed communication. So there's delayed language development overall, or it could be limited vocabulary, or it could be that they have a very expansive vocabulary, but they're not able to apply it. So they have labels, they can label and identify, but having a conversation about items, that's very difficult for them. Some students are completely nonverbal. And then overall, there's difficulty in understanding spoken language, understanding directions, following directions, and or their expressive language skills. So, and this includes pragmatics. So those social rules for communication, understanding that back and forth and that give and take in conversational turn taking, staying on topic, switching topics, things like that. So children could have difficulty with abstract concepts. Delayed receptive language could mean they have difficulty following directions, as I mentioned. And then the delayed vocabulary impacts their ability to express themselves. There's often a literal understanding of speech. So I had a student, we were on the second floor of my school, and we had an elevator, and we were getting on the elevator. There was a student in the class with a wheelchair, so we would take the elevator up and down instead of the stairs. And I said, okay, everybody, let's hop on the elevator. And I had one little boy that hopped on the elevator, and he hopped the whole way up to the second floor. So that very literal understanding. And then there also might be some echolalia, some an unusual pitch in their voice, intonation, or their prosody in speech. They might talk in kind of like a sing-song speech when they're talking, or a lot of repetitive, saying the same thing over and over again. So in terms of their social interactions, there's difficulty relating to others, understanding social norms, and then again, this goes along with those delays in the pragmatic skills, engaging in social interactions, those nonverbals of communication, body language, things like that, controlling their emotions. Some children might feel over anxious. Taking turns can be difficult, both in play and in conversation. I mentioned body language, staying on topic, and then also considering or understanding the perspective of others. Play skills are also impacted in terms of the ability to play with toys in a functional manner. So children could be really into vehicles, but it's really, they're not using the vehicles in the garage and sharing and taking turns with peers that they're playing with. They might just like the vehicle to roll it back and forth and watch the wheels move. So really watching for how kids are using those toys and using those materials functionally. So another one of the common characteristics is repetitive behaviors. So these are behaviors that are repetitive in nature. They interfere with their learning, their social interaction, and then other daily activities. So there could be repetitive motor movements or use of objects or speech. So there's, some kids might flap their hand or have an object that they, wave back and forth. Repeating lines in movies, so that repetitive language. Asking the same question repeatedly, spinning objects, watching, dropping an object and watching it fall, like anything that they're doing, over and over again. The insistence on sameness and inflexibility with routines. So I have had a student in the past where he wanted to wear shoes, he wanted to wear rain boots every day at school. And so we worked on moving him towards, wearing, transitioning to shoes for certain parts of the day. And we had a schedule, and for every activity during the day, we would have, a picture of the boots or the picture of the shoes. So then we'd stretch that out so that eventually he wore his shoes all day. And then, a specific color, if there's a favorite color, green, needing to sit in the same color chair every day, or needing to have the same color cup or something like that. And then seasonal clothing changes. The clothing changes with the season can be difficult, going from long sleeves to short sleeves. And a lot of that is also kind of overlaps with some of that sensory. The ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. So, maybe always wanting to walk the same path or the same way down the hall, instead of down the middle or on the side, one or the other. Having the same foods, not really wanting to, branch out and try different foods, sort of getting stuck in a loop in a verbal exchange. Just, again, with that communication, repeating the same thing over and over again. So the restricted or fixated interests, these can be abnormal in intensity. And then also it falls in with they're difficult with transitions, overall transition between activities or transitions from, one toy to the next. Sensory seeking or sensory defensiveness. And this can be a variety. Some children have one area where they really seek out or have difficulties with, or it could just be all encompassing. So it's on that spectrum, and how different characteristics are impacting their learning and their ability to interact with the environment. So some of the sensory temperature, sounds, textures, visual fascination with lights or movement. Some kids are really seeking out that if they overstuff their mouth, they might have a hard time, just feeling that their mouth is full and just keep putting, things in or food in. Washing their hands, it's like you see them in the sink and they're washing up to their shoulders and scrubbing and everything, just like wanting to have that feeling, and just that increased sensory. Some kids really respond to deep pressure. They could just be all over the place, and that deep pressure really calms them down. So they're seeking out some of those sensory sensations. So the intense interests, so there could be, it's their level of interest, but then how does it interfere with daily activity. So I have students that just love Thomas the Train or love dinosaurs, and they know every single fact about the dinosaur and everything about them, but that's all they want to talk about. And they have this vast knowledge, but it's really difficult to transition them to a different topic, or if that item is not available for play, then that can be difficult for them. Staying on topic in conversations, changing the topic, again, falls in line with those change and transitions. And then it interferes with activities. Distracted by something while on the playground, for example, if they, are really into bugs and, they just want to find bugs in the mulch or, dig for bugs, but they're not interacting with their peers or wanting to play on the playground. And then it's really a limited exploration of new topics. So all of these kind of put together, there are some learning patterns that are apparent with kids with autism. They often there's a difficulty with processing auditory information, and then delayed processing speed overall can be evident. They do have strong rote memory skills. They can remember amazing facts. And, I had a student once, you could ask him math concepts, and he was able to multiply 2- and 3-digit numbers correctly without just in his head, just in a matter of seconds. There's a generally preference for visual versus auditory materials. So that's really where picture schedules are really beneficial for transitions throughout the day. And then there's also, they typically have difficulty with unstructured times, that waiting times, again, transitions, where change and the lack of order it can be very difficult. Sometimes students have a hard time generalizing new skills across settings and people. So what they might do in the classroom, they're not doing at home, or vice versa. And then the goal really is to generalize across settings. They typically have a strong conceptual knowledge, but then difficulty applying that knowledge. As I mentioned earlier, they can recognize numbers and letters. A lot of parents are really excited that their kids are reading, but they have very limited comprehension. And then it impacts their executive functioning skills. So their ability to problem solve, sustain attention over time, initiating tasks, and then initiating interactions with people can be really difficult. Managing time, organizing their materials, and then sequencing the steps to complete an activity or to complete a routine task. So those are some of the characteristics and the way that some children with autism learn. These are some classroom strategies that are really, really helpful. And I mentioned before, these work for all students. If you have a student that has really a low attention to activities, some of these items will help. Difficulty with transitions. A lot of kids have difficulty with transitions, so a lot of these strategies will help. So hopefully you'll be able to maybe use these and apply these to some other students. And then, so this is not, hopefully it's not taken as one more thing to add to your plate to do in your classroom, but really just other ideas to add to your toolbox. So some of the strategies, they involve establishing routines and then some visual supports. So there's a picture here of hand washing, and this could, I have a daily schedule. It's a visual schedule with photographs of the actual activities throughout the day. And then we change it up every day based on what we're doing. And I want to note, it's really important when you have a schedule, not just to have it up there and have it visual or, displayed so they can see it, but teach the schedule, go through it, and then, use it every day. So teach them how, we go back and we check our schedule. And when something is over, we either turn the picture around or take it off, so they can see the sequence throughout the day, that activities are done, getting closer to that end of the day. So for all of these, don't just have them out on display, but teach how to use them and then use them. So in terms of establishing consistency with routines, you can think about how you might feel if somebody changes your daily routine or something happens that changes your daily routine. I know I would probably feel a little bit thrown off and a little bit stressed. So they help us feel like we're in more control. It reduces that stress and anxiety, and it provides some structure. And so children with autism, they can have an inflexible adherence to routines. So you may want to change it up, though, to limit some of that rigid behavior. It's a balance. So you're also teaching, providing the routines and structure, but then also teaching some changes in routines that might help increase their flexibility. And then visual supports, I mentioned the picture schedules. And some of these items, I have the picture of the bus to indicate that it's time to go home. I have the picture of the playground, when we're going outside, picture of washing hands when it's time to wash hands before, bathroom, lunch, whatever, picture of the bathroom. These are all things that can be incorporated into the daily schedule for the whole class, but then also within each activity. So going to the bathroom is a whole breakdown of tasks that you can create different pictures for, in terms of what do you, task analysis of what you do first, then this, then this. Same with washing hands. I have a picture strip in front of the sink. So it's, turn on the water, get the soap, scrub the hands. So they're constantly are those visual reminders. The other thing is that I have these pictures, just individual pictures. So for a child that is having a really difficult time transitioning from, cleaning up to get ready to go out to the playground, I can show them the picture of the playground so they know that, it's cleanup time and this is what's happening next. So it's up on the board for the visual schedule, but then I'm showing them in just an individual picture right there in the moment. Timers work really well. Here's a picture of a visual timer, kind of looks like a lava lamp. But, there are visual timers, sand timers, you set a timer on your phone. So giving them that warning. So, if, in 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, whatever, to let them know that the activity is coming to a close. And then having that timer go off. I use the timer on my phone so they can hear it. So they have that, like when we're out on the playground, that it's time to line up. A visual timer like this might be something for if you want them to sit for a non-preferred activity, that they're sitting there for a certain period of time, and then they know that, after the timer is done, then they can go on to the next activity. I put some of these pictures here. This is from Second Step that we use in the classroom as well. It's a social and emotional curriculum, and they're just picture cues. So we have, voices quiet, body calm, eyes watching and ears listening are the other two. And those are really helpful. We have them up on by the morning meeting area, but then I also have smaller pictures that I can show them at any point in the day, in any place in the day. And they've been taught what those mean. And then all they, I show them that visual cue, and they know what that means, and they, quiet down or, calm their body. Let's see. So some other strategies, building relationships, incorporating their interests in activities to make those connections, those, with, like, I, talk about Thomas the Train. I mean, so really using that to connect with them and then expanding on their play. The use of social stories can be really helpful, where there are, you can either use a book that talks about different behaviors, and or you can actually create your own with that person's name and their picture if you want to individualize it. So those are really helpful. And then build on the successes of the student using positive reinforcement, no matter how small the task is. I mean, just really build on their success. Another, building relationships, you can allow for choices, which gives them a little bit of control. Closed choices they're typically more concrete. Do you want this or do you want this? And then, using, if you do this, then you can have that, and show them pictures, or when you do this, then this. And it really increases their sense of control. The physical arrangement of the classroom, it's, I can't stress. If you go in, think about a store that you like to shop in. What do you like about it? So I know if I go into a store and things are just thrown on the floor and just haphazardly stocked on the shelves, or, if it's a clothing store and you have to dig through everything, it can be, sometimes I just turn around and and leave. So having items, that are, bins that are labeled so kids can access materials independently, wall displays that are not super overwhelming, where for those kids that, just might be, that's just too much sensory, too much visual stimuli, and then different areas that have clear boundaries. So those are some things to consider. And then these items are the most fun to incorporate into the classroom, because all the kids love them and they are super helpful as well. So some of the kids that either have, that are either, are like sensory seeking, or just really sensory defensive to different materials, I've listed some things. So the first one, heavy work, we have a backpack helper, and it's often the same student from week to week, but he really needs that heavy just pressure, that weight. So what we do is we put a ream of paper in his backpack, and if we're going to the playground, we might put some bubbles in there or something. So he's really proud of the fact that he's helping, bring some of the things out to the playground. But it also, he goes for it, and he looks for that backpack. For some of the heavy work, you could get a helper to help stack the chairs or help push chairs to the table. So those are some ideas. We also have another ream of paper, and we've covered it with tape and duct tape and things like that so it's not ripping open. But they like to hold it on their laps during circle. So we have some of that. And then fidget items. So here, this little yellow guy here, it's like rubbery and squeezy, and the eyes bulge out, and it's kind of like this soft rubbery feeling, and they like that. A lot of you have probably seen these, the Pop-It things, I think it's what it's called. So just, some various fidget items. And then this here is a picture of jewelry, and it's the colored pieces are like a hard rubber. And for kids that, are mouthing a lot of objects, they will, I have one student who he wears one, and he basically has that in his mouth for the majority of the day. So this picture here is of shaving cream, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a craft stick, there's a hand with who's wearing a glove. So if you have students that they don't like to touch any of like finger painting or shaving cream or Play-Doh, you can give them a glove to put on. And over time, I've kind of like pulled that glove off, and then they're like, oh, I'm touching it. And it's really helped to sort of desensitize that, and get them closer to, just shaping their behavior to, have their hand in the, like really, interacting with that material. Craft sticks are another item, or paintbrushes or anything. So they're playing with the shaving cream or finger paint without actually touching it. So they can still do the same activity with their peers. And then flexible seating is another strategy that's really helpful. That would be for students that just have a really hard time sitting for any length of time. And And so here's a slide on flexible seating options. So we have the wobbly stools, and those for this age, we have to, we have an adult sitting behind a student if they're in a wobbly stool because they are wobbly. And then the red disc, it's on wheels. Well, not on wheels, I'm sorry. It's kind of on this ball. And so it's wobbly, but it sits right on the floor. And then there is a big bumpy cushion that's an option too. And then we have cube chairs that we have in the preschool classrooms, but if you'll see on each chair, there's a cushion. So there's a little bumpy cushion here, and then these other cushions are our OT got them for us. When kids sit down on them, they vibrate. So they give them that sensation. And then there's a ream of paper. So we have that covered, and then they can hold that on their lap. So those are a lot of different items that are helpful to have in the classroom. So, any questions?
And as we pause for questions a little bit, I'm sorry, I pulled the trigger too soon. I meant to send this a little bit later, but I put the Child Find link in there too, in case there are any families who might want additional information, or children who may need additional support. I have that link for you for our FCPS Child Find site. But do we have any questions? Feel free to chat or use your microphone. Also, too, we will have this recording available, and if you do have any questions down the line, you're always welcome to reach back out to me. I do want to appreciate Dr. Brown mentioning the skill building and teaching perspective that I think is beneficial for all our students, especially particularly in that early childhood age range too. All right, so I'm just going to throw up one more link if you have a second. I think there's really only 3 questions. If you can complete the feedback survey form, I just put that link in the chat. And then if there are no other questions, I will be reaching out probably tomorrow with the link for this recording. And as I said before, if you do think of any other questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. But if not for now, I would like to thank Dr. Nina Brown for joining us.